Hi, church. I'm Abby, and I have to confess that historically, summer is not my favorite time of year. I pretty much melt in the heat. Shocker. And admit that a day at the beach sounds like an absolutely unfun idea. I know. A friend from the Cape even tried to convince me otherwise by inviting me to the beach club they belonged to. Okay, having a snack bar, bathrooms, umbrellas, and convenient parking did warm me up to the idea of a beach day, but I was still hot and sandy, or it was too hot out of the water or too cold in the water. Theoretically, I get why people find it fun, but it's just not easy fun for me. I get it, and I do like the beach, but I prefer a fall trip to collect shells all bundled up. Off-season is the best beach season. Ample free parking is very, very fun for me. I can tell it's much more fun because I feel so much more relaxed in my body. I'm not filled with tension, worrying about all the details. This summer, we're going back to the beginning to reconnect to what it means that we are people with physical bodies. We've looked at lots of parts of our physical identity and why those are important to connect with as people following Jesus. Today, I want to talk about what it means to be playful in and with our bodies. I'll be honest, I looked at all the topics for this series, like frailty, race, sex, and thought I got an easy topic. I have kids, so I have to engage with play all the time. This shouldn't be too challenging. But how wrong I was. In preparation, I decided to take time every day to engage in something playful. Easy, right? I get to play for work. But that was so much harder than it seemed. I realized how out of touch I was with how I enjoyed playing for my own sake, not just to entertain the kids. I'd become more like Roy Kent than Ted Lasso. This didn't just impact me. This became really clear when at the beginning of the pandemic, I was told by my daughter in no uncertain terms that baking with me wasn't fun. Yikes, that really was a wake-up call. I wasn't passing along a love of baking to my daughter because I was being too controlling. I was determined that one goal of the pandemic isolation time was to make baking with me fun so that neither of us ended up in a meltdown. I had to channel the grace of Julia Child to chase out the Gordon Ramsay that had become part of my attitude in the kitchen. My own body became tense, and you can bet that made the people around me tense up too. So as I tried to figure out how to reacquaint myself with playing, many of the things I thought of felt more like work and another thing I just had to do rather than something I was free to enjoy. I realized I had forgotten how, or even if I would enjoy play. Would it just feel silly and a waste of time? The question of if I could be successful at playing, even that held me back. Yes, I am a chronic overthinker. My therapist has great job security. How about for you? If you were to be given 8 hours to do something playful, would that feel like a gift or a burden or a waste of time? Even as a staff, when we try to plan an all-staff gathering, everyone has a very different idea of what fun is. Pastor Brian would love it if we did board games or skits. Pastor Chris would 100% choose a beach day. And Pastor Megan would love a group workshop where everyone could speak their minds and reconcile any differences. Hey, to each their own, you do you, boo. We might not be able to name what we really would find playful, but perhaps we do have a very visceral reaction to what does not feel like play. A few weeks ago on social media, I asked people to share with me what to them was the opposite of play. Here are some of the words many of you came up with: obligations, competition, discontent, limiting creativity, drudgery, discord, joyless toil, perfectionism, work, compulsory, boring, simple amusement, passivity, when you can't be curious, coercion, self-importance, anger, and judgment. What's standing out to you as you hear these words? You know what these words made me realize as I looked over them was that toil and play are not defined by a specific task, but rather by the surrounding attitudes and expectations we have internally or externally. Maybe that's why we can find ourselves more exhausted by vacations rather than refreshed and renewed. I'm noticing when an activity or space makes a person feel limited in what they're able to do, or an environment where people feel forced to do the activity, or judged or held to a standard of perfectionism, or being watched, it lacks playfulness. It's toiling away. Toiling in its many forms confines and it stifles and it constricts. Toiling limits our imagination to only what we've been told by the world is good and worthy. Toiling will feel like an impossible battle with the feeling of scarcity in all we do: work, relationships, and rest. Think back. Have you been on vacation and felt that sting of competition or jealousy or envy? Has vacation or your chosen entertainment involved such a big financial cost that it brought on more stress for you and those around you? Like, this thing better work out or else. That pressure builds and builds until we end up with a migraine or GI issues or a back that was thrown out just reaching for a tissue. Not that I've ever done that. Yes, I absolutely have. The pressure to have a good time all the time carries the weight of obligations or perfectionism. It is near impossible to rest when you have to be perfect. Friends, I have yet to meet one single person in my time at High Rock who isn't working hard at something or many things. We're all working really hard. And playing hard is supposed to be that thing that helps us combat the overwhelm of toiling away at work. But what happens when we don't actually play in a restorative way? What happens when we just numb out or distract ourselves? We can convince ourselves that the overwhelm is gone, but it's really just hidden somewhere else. So it isn't just that we're toiling away at our responsibilities, but we end up toiling away at trying to unwind. Distractions can't build your resolve or offer meaningful perspective, connect you with your body, or engage your mind in a restorative way. Today, I'm not trying to make work the enemy, because we will need to work in this life, whether what we're working at is a career, a hobby, or a goal. It's not necessarily what we are doing, but how and why we're going about our work and rest. Hustle culture has taken over to the point where many people have to work long hours and at least one side gig to make ends meet or work towards their financial needs. Beyond that, part of the problem is that hustle culture is celebrated. Instead of taking stock of what it's costing us, we're praised for using the computers on our desks or in our pockets. We have reduced the meaning of life to being productive in absolutely everything we do, and our bodies bear this cost too. So perhaps we have to heal through our bodies as well. Our bodies and mind become fixed in a survival mode. Dreaming, creative thinking, and imagination become more and more constricted. That kind of constriction can be felt in our bodies. If our rest or play is caught up in that same sort of toiling, we'll struggle to find that renewal we long for in our bodies. We aren't, in reality, going to get the restoration our bodies and mind need so badly. Perhaps the next product, the next workout, the next purchase we make, that will fix us. But how long have any one of those actually satisfied before that nagging feeling of overwhelm or scarcity returns? This year, there were times when my husband, Scott, reminded me over and over to email a friend to go stay in their spare room for the evening to get some time by myself. Do you want to know how long it took me to actually take that opportunity? Give or take 6 months, around there. And Pastor Megan had to get on my case as well. This isn't a humble brag, I promise. It's a confession. The idea of going to rest and be by myself was overwhelming and daunting, that I put it off because taking a break was something I didn't know if I could do well. I wanted that break, and it felt more like work to plan, so I kept delaying it. I know it sounds absolutely bananas. Let's look back at our passage at Genesis today. We read, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Honestly, I wouldn't blame anyone who read our text from today and felt like, yeah, all God calls us to is to work hard and provide. So of course, we're feeling like the work is never done. There's always more to do, and it's all overwhelming to try to be perfect all the time. Perhaps sin affects our inner thoughts when we read Scripture too. We read the gift of stewarding creation as a burden and a command. Then add in what God says after Adam and Eve eat the fruit off the tree of knowledge. Staying in Genesis, let's read on a little bit, just to chapter 3. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. That really escalated quickly. We might read this as humanity screwed up and disobeyed God, so the meaning of life now is to work off the consequences of that error for eternity. We might have been created for good, but then humanity fell, and now this is our reality, to work, sweat, and toil. Our identity becomes more formed by the fall than by bearing the image of God. And the part of the story we focus on is the part of the story we will begin to reflect. Perhaps the narrative of the fall has taken the place of the created goodness, and we've forgotten how to tell the whole story. The fall doesn't negate God's blessing over creation. Yet, part of the fall is that it makes us forgetful of who we really are. The reality is, work will be a part of our lives, but it becomes problematic when work takes up our entire lives. To quote an iconic horror movie, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. There was an entire movie around the concept of what isolation and constant work can do to a person. If you haven't seen The Shining, spoiler alert, it does not end well. Though hopefully you've not been driven to those same extremes, maybe you can relate to the feeling of dullness. Finding it harder and harder to work up the motivation to show up to your day and feeling good about what the day has ahead of you. You're doing things you love on paper, but you just feel stuck. And maybe you feel this way about your spiritual life, about prayer, about relating to God. As you listen today, perhaps you feel like you're stuck in a rut and can remember a time when you felt more connected to God. Maybe following Jesus is another thing in your life that feels like endless toil. But no matter what spiritual disciplines or prayer or books you read, there just isn't that same peace and joy and hope that there once was. Friends, toiling in our spiritual lives for an emotional high or a mountaintop feeling can have a significant impact on our spiritual lives. It ends up functioning more like a bank account where we try to make deposits of goodness and get rewards in return, and that's exhausting. If that's what a life of faith is, my anxiety would be through the roof trying to keep my account with God out of the red. And when I do feel this way, I've named it spiritual anxiety because it's not aligned with who I know God to be. It flags me to slow down and think about what's happening differently. I do a reality check. Is God love? Yes. Is this anxiety I'm feeling what love would ask of me? No. Is God's love scarce or something I need to earn? Also, a definitive no. This undoing of the narrative can be challenging, but we've been given our bodies as a gift and a source of life. We need to reclaim that narrative of goodness. And as we learn to listen and respond, we can actually begin to respond to what our bodies need. We'll always have things to do, and toil is ready to keep us captive to the false self-satisfaction of keeping busy all the time, at work, at rest, even in our lives of faith. And in all of these, toil feels like being pulled out to sea by a riptide. You have to exert all the energy you have, but you find yourself worse off, exhausted and trying to survive. The only way out of a riptide is counterintuitive. You have to stop fighting against it and swim parallel to the shore. So in our metaphor, what does that look like in life? How do we disengage from toiling? If you, like me, wonder in your packed schedule, how could you possibly fit play? Then you're in a great place to begin exploring. Play isn't something separate from our lives. It's something we can fold into it. It's a way to bring light into the darkness that toiling could never do. There's this scene in a TV show called Ted Lasso that illustrates this phenomenon so pointedly. Isaac McAdoo has taken over as the team captain with really big shoes to fill, as the legendary veteran player Roy Kent has just retired. Isaac has a ton of pressure on his shoulder. This new responsibility has changed where his head is at and how he plays on the field, costing them really important games. The former captain, Roy Kent, steps in to bring Isaac to a pickup game in the city. As he plays alongside peers who are simply playing for the love of the game, he is reminded of what it's like not just to play soccer, but to play at soccer without the pressure of judgment or a paycheck or the fear of failure, all riding on his shoulders. He plays the rest of the game with a new confidence and freedom. He reconnects to the natural talent he's trained into his body, and his skills on the field light up, and he's able to make incredible plays. His body remembers. It was awakened by the playfulness. It's the same game, but a new Isaac McAdoo. So why is play so transformative? As an adult, if I want to experience transformation, I need to hit the gym, get a new outfit, a new job, a new spiritual practice, and take a class. Sure, those are all good things and can make different types of transformation possible. But do you remember those words that are the opposite of play? It can be so easy to make those good things that were once playful into spaces ruled by perfectionism. We want to get the workout perfect to get the perfect body. We want to get the perfect spiritual practice or habit to feel like we're crushing it at following Jesus. Take a new job or enroll in classes that totally align with our passion, just to find ourselves back in toil and obligation. That passion or hobby just isn't fun anymore. Following Jesus could start to feel more like death than life, or feels more like failure than thriving. And this is where I think we can resonate with that story about Isaac McAdoo. What was once playful and freeing has become endless toil. So, how do we find ourselves at play again? Can we reconnect with our bodies to ignite wonder and joy that no one can take from you? Friends, play is within our DNA that our Creator made us for. Our bodies were made not for toil, but for joy. Play, friends. Play refuses to engage with the patterns of the world, and so can offer us a pathway to restoration. It offers an escape when we feel like we're drowning. Play invites joy. It invites overcoming fear. Just like swimming parallel to the shore, play can help us reorient back to what it feels like to be a body at rest. Instead of fighting, we can begin delighting. And to really begin to play, we need to let go of the fear of judgment, of what will or won't come of our time or energy. Play is an expression of freedom that we can feel throughout our bodies, minds, and spirits. When we enter into playfulness with an activity, or in the way we approach what we're doing, we're viscerally reminded in our bodies that we are created good. We're created to know freedom because we were freely created by God. So freely we can play. Friends, God didn't create us out of obligation or to prove anything. Creation itself, including us, bears the playfulness of God. I think this is why Jesus reminds us to welcome the little children. Children play and imagine and wonder and create so freely. They laugh easily and unselfconsciously. Welcoming children into our worlds is meant to interrupt our way of thinking, being, and doing. Laughter is wonderfully contagious. However, maybe kids are a bridge too far for you, so perhaps allow nature to interrupt your way of relating to the world. There is God's playfulness all around us, and creatures we see in forests, in playing under porches, or near water sources. Okay, I'm just kidding. Those were absolutely pictures of Pokemon. But creatures in our world are just as interesting to see. God didn't create just one creature to swim in the sea. There are millions. God didn't create one predator and one prey animal. There's so much variety. And don't even get me going about the creativity we get to see in birds and insects. God said rule over creation. How incredible is it that we have such wonders to study, to prompt us in our imagination. The natural world is anything but static. It's always adapting and evolving. Creation freely expands and creates new life. So this too invites us to playfully imagine new possibilities we haven't experienced before. There is hope in what is unseen. What suffering we see, experience, or endure is not all that we are destined to. Seeing playfulness and engaging our bodies in play brings us to that hope beyond the tangible and rational world before us. And God wasn't just playful in the beginning. God is still playful in creation. And we're invited to do the same thing with God as an act of worship and thanksgiving. Creation is for delighting in, and you are delighted in. You're not the sum of your sins, for through Christ and through creation, you are called very good. In our experience of freedom, we remember that we were freely and delightfully created by God. In play, we experience God's grace and reimagine God, not as one who watches over us, just waiting for us to fail, but as the God who watches over us with abundant love, delight, and grace all at once. The need for this embodied reminder plays out across the scriptural narrative too. David loved to dance and make music and write songs, and Jesus was always at parties. God loves a good time. So friends, what is the purpose of life? Give me $1,000 and I'll tell you. I'll put my Venmo on the screen. Okay, so I can't answer that for you. I think we have many purposes in our lifetime. For me, in freeing myself from toiling to find the one purpose or the one thing I'm most productive at or what the world values me most by, I've found a greater joy. How can you start your own journey back to playfulness? How will your body know the difference? Can your body and mind together be renewed through play? It can. We can get there. Here's one way I strategically practice bringing my body into play. I'm a person who likes structure and rules because then I can decide what boundaries there are to push or maybe even reject. It creates a space of safety, but there's also freedom to push and readjust as needed. I dusted off an old drawing set with some black and white charcoal. Boundary, limited color palette. Next, what would I draw? An apple. The boundary, limited subject. Finally, to address that pesky momentum towards perfectionism, the purpose of this time was not to produce an Instagrammable apple or prove anything to anyone. So the final boundary was time. 3 minutes. These boundaries actually created a more freeing environment to be playful for me. I sat down for 3 minutes to draw an apple with only black and white as my color values, and it was great. I drew the apple and tapped into a different part of myself that was free to draw an apple for 3 minutes, which served no other purpose than creating something new on paper. And now it sits on my shelf. I noticed I was able to approach my responsibilities to work and relationship with better perspective and playfulness, meaning I knew that they and these things were not all that defined me. It also meant engaging in play with my kids and delighting in their delight. Creating spaces we're all a little freer from the pressure to perform is important. And to quote the renowned Professor Valerie Frizzle, PhD, we need to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. It's clear that we are working hard, but we're not playing hard, or perhaps we're toiling away too much at trying to relax. We're burning out and checking out and then back to work. This, friends, is not a pattern we can sustain mentally, emotionally, physically. We are made for so much more than toil. We are created in the image of God, and in the image of God we were created. Yes, it's so important that I'm saying it twice and in 2 different arrangements. We bear the divine likeness in our bodies, in our laughter, in the way our minds work, and our bodies, how they perceive the world and move through it. When was the last time you really laughed? Not just to be polite, but really laughed in a free way. You didn't care if you snorted or lost your breath or people started staring at you. Has it been a while since you caught the giggles? I know many people who will say that they need a good cry. In this season, given all that's going on, I think I need a really good laugh. Perhaps we all need to connect back to what it feels like to get lost in something we love, maybe with somebody we love. I know for me, I've been having to pray. God, teach me again how to play. Let me not take myself too seriously or be so afraid of messing up that I don't try something new. Put in my path people who are better at play than me so that I can learn from them. Engaging in play is a stance against fear. Engaging in play is defiance against how the world wants to value you. It's to actively and joyfully agree with God that, yes, I bear your image, I bear your own creativity, I will delight in being loved. It's to agree that you are worthy of joy, not just as an intellectual exercise, but as an embodied agreement that can lift our souls back up from the depths, to remember the light and the lightness of following Jesus. When we play, we have to face our fear of what someone will think and what they will say. We face the reality we might not perform perfectly or have some impressive product to show for it. It will be a bit uncomfortable and a bit awkward, but practice makes better. Just better. Practice makes better. We can become friends with play again, and perhaps it will become more and more familiar. On TikTok, yes, I have TikTok, it's been a refreshing window into how people have found ways to play and connect with a visceral, embodied joy. I saw a woman build a whole community around her own commitment to dance every single day in defiance of her depression. At a time when I was overwhelmed, having a playful posture meant watching others at play, to be reminded that I too can play. And a friend from grad school, Kayla, is a regular participant with an improv group for the sake of being intentionally playful and creative. She shared with me how what she learns about herself and others in that space transform her approach to preaching and theology, and how she shows up in a space. It makes her able to be more hospitable and playful in every day. A playful posture is something we can cultivate. Play doesn't have to mean going outside to play baseball. It could be looking for playfulness in nature or in those around you. It could mean tinkering away in your garage at a project you haven't been making time for. It could mean putting on Simon and Garfunkel wicked loud and singing at the top of your lungs on the way to Costco to do errands. Theoretically, of course. When was the last time you played with the joyful volume of your own voice or follow your body's lead dancing to a favorite song across the kitchen floor? Play can be spontaneous or it can be planned. Play is absolutely not one size fits all. It will reflect you and how you experience freedom, but it is longing to come out and offer you an embodied reminder that there's hope, that you are a new creation. There's more possible than what we know of the world or of ourselves today. God created us playfully, and as we try on playfulness, we can create a new future with God, remembering that God's yoke is easy and the burden is light.